As I looked down at the center of Berlin, it looked as though a volcano were erupting.
Hitler's once mighty Reich is strangled from the east, crushed from the west, obliterated from the sky.
One felt a hideous sense of inferiority and desperation.
January 1945. As Allied armies close in on Germany from the west, Russia readies an overwhelming attack from the east. More than 2 million men, 7,000 tanks, and 5,000 planes mass for the knockout blow against the battered armies of the Third Reich. While the Red Air Force gains strength, the Luftwaffe is desperate for pilots, planes, fuel. Adolf Galland senses impending disaster.
The Russians were able to build a mighty air force. They were able to maintain a strong air force. They were able to rearm in an area outside the reach of the German Luftwaffe. And they had no shortage of fuel.
Luftwaffe aces, once supremely confident, see their ranks decimated. Frederick Obliser, Luftwaffe.
We were so low on fuel that we positioned our planes for takeoff by having them pulled by oxen in order to save fuel. This meant that each mission had to be successful. Only the most experienced pilots were used for difficult missions, but then the experienced pilots also suffered greater casualties.
From Leningrad to the Crimea, Soviet forces advance. The Red Air Force, reinforced with Air Cobras from America and powerful new Yak fighters, fills the sky with fire.
We were able now to lend air support to our troops on the battlefield.
Fedor Archipenko, Red Air Force.
Domination in air power at that time then fully shifted toward the side of the Soviet Union. Air superiority was now completely ours.
The Luftwaffe is forced to ration its remaining strength. Heinz Marquard, Luftwaffe.
At the end of the war, the sorties became tougher from week to week due to the superiority of the enemy at that time. The pressure on us increased because our numbers decreased steadily, and we received neither replacement aircraft nor replacement pilots.
The Luftwaffe pilots desperately try to stem the Russian advance toward the Polish border.
Considering the distances we had to cover, we were like a fire brigade, putting out fires. This meant being transferred every 3 to 4 days. We had tremendous logistical problems, so on a daily basis, we had to perform our missions and already think about the next airfield we were going to use.
Faced with defeat, Luftwaffe pilots must call on reserves of inner strength to continue the fight. Soviet ground forces cross into Poland. The Red Air Force flies ground support missions to punish the broken Wehrmacht. Walter Krupinski, Luftwaffe.
The Russian pilots were extremely good bomber pilots, that is, low-level attack pilots. In low-level flight formation, they would fly wing on wing, very closely packed, providing us with a large target which we could strafe from side to side. But they could nonetheless maintain formation, carrying their rockets and bombs to the target. They were very brave, but they naturally suffered great losses.
There were a lot of pilots who died. The shift to new equipment, to new planes, all this made us carry on a very difficult battle with the enemy.
I have a total of 275 recognized victories, of which the majority were in the East. Am I proud of any special victory? I don't know this expression, proud. Naturally, every victory increased the sense of self-worth of every fighter pilot. It contributed to his experience. But one can't really talk of pride, because when you see what's left of your opponent on the ground, I think any emotion that there is would probably exclude the feeling of pride.
By mid-January 1945, German defenses crumble outside Warsaw. Dietrich Rabach, Luftwaffe.
Und ich sah dann, wie die
I saw German troops being surrounded. I saw German troops retreating before the Russians, which was something I had never seen before. And I saw the encirclement worsen. And eventually, I saw how the German troops were finally bombarded with rockets and artillery fire.
Spring 1945. It is clear that the Russians cannot be stopped. As the Red Army advances from the east, Allied forces on the Western Front roll through German cities, blasted to rubble by incessant aerial bombardment. The Luftwaffe is Hitler's last hope for survival. Hitler commands his ground troops to fight to the death, but he orders the cream of the Luftwaffe pulled back to defend the fatherland from heavy Allied bombing raids.
We were taken out of our unit in Russia. I was brought to Germany. My mission was to combat the enemy escort fighters, not the bombers.
When we got air superiority, man, we could, when they turned us loose to pursue after escorting the bombers, that's when the Luftwaffe bought the farm.
My first impression as I flew my first sortie over Germany was, oh my God, look at all those targets. This is going to be a lot better than Russia. In Russia, you sometimes really had to search for an opponent.
We had 15 fighter groups in the 8th Air Force, 15 fighter groups in the 9th Air Force. We could put up 50 airplanes in each group every day. So you figured out that's 1,500 fighters. There wasn't any place those guys could run and hide that we couldn't find them.
In my first sortie, I shot down 2 Mustangs. In my second, a Thunderbolt. But then it was over. In my third sortie, I was the one who had to bail out.
The noose tightens. The Red Army grinds toward Berlin. Allied forces pour across the Rhine. For the Third Reich, it is the countdown to doomsday. Hitler issues insane commands to phantom armies from his bunker in Berlin, and still the Luftwaffe fights.
At the end of the war, the High Command gave orders, which must have been issued by non-flyers. They expected one to accomplish the impossible, which we couldn't follow. For instance, a mission without the possibility of return. You wouldn't have had enough fuel to return to the German side of the front. Those orders were luckily refused by the squadron command.
The Luftwaffe sends up hastily trained young pilots. They face seasoned veterans of the Battle of Britain. Brian Kingham, RAF.
The German fighter pilots were getting shot down like flies, and most of them done about 10 hours flying. So for the last few months of the war, the opposition really melted away. With the exception of 1 or 2 old hands, there were a bunch of semi-trained young men being killed.
Luftwaffe aces refused to quit, even in the face of chaos.
We were a group of 6 fighters escorting the Dora 9. On our return leg, as those fighter bombers were about to land, they were attacked by enemy planes. I sent out 4 of my escorts to defend the airfield.
The enemy didn't see us coming. They continued to fly in a very calm and relaxed manner. We also had the sun behind us. I gave the order to attack the enemy fighters simultaneously, and we attacked. 2 of them went up in flames right away, and 3 of them somersaulted around in the air after they were hit. The other fighters, who didn't even expect this, all of them dove down. Immediately, they went into a dive and left the bombers without protection, without any cover.
My wingman and I attacked the enemy planes from underneath and came under fire. I was shot down, but I was able to save myself by bailing out. I celebrate that day as my birthday. Seeing your hometown reduced to rubble was motivation enough for us to fight. So we had only one mission: protect the homeland and the troops in retreat. They had unbelievable losses.
Hitler concentrates what power he has left against the Russian juggernaut advancing on Berlin. To buy time, he demands that every German sacrifice his life for the Reich. It is carnage.
Everyone knew perfectly well the war was lost. There was no more compromise solution. Our situation would not improve. And we were faced with unconditional surrender. That is the worst condition. And then came total destruction.
April 1945. More than 500,000 Red Army troops. Thousands of tanks. 21,000 rocket launchers and 12,000 guns rip into Berlin's last defenses. The Red Air Force hunts down Luftwaffe bombers.
I must say, we really liked those planes, those bombers. You could approach them easily because they had practically no ability to fire from the back. And now they had only one machine gunner left up there, and we were coming up around him. We let off a round of machine gun fire, and they started burning. One went up in flames. The second one went up in flames. The third, the fourth. We shot down more than half of the enemy planes and lost only 7 of our Soviet fighters.
April 25th, 1945. Near the town of Torgau on the Elbe River, Soviet ground forces link up with American GIs. The mood is festive. April 26th. The Germans control an area of Berlin only 10 miles long and 3 miles deep.
There we had very few flights because there was such a strong strike from the land forces, and it was so fast. As a result, we flew only 3 or 4 missions, light missions to escort our bombers, which were bombing Berlin. They were trying to destroy the main hotbeds of resistance in the city, where there was still fighting.
The end of the war was foreseeable, that it must end in our defeat and capitulation. It made me sad to see us losing the war, but it was inevitable.
As the hour of surrender approaches, Luftwaffe aces destroy their planes on the ground.
The most frustrating experience for me was when we blew up our machines in 1945. We had to bid farewell to a lifestyle and to our comrades. And of course, we didn't know what the results would be historically and otherwise.
German soldiers and airmen surrendered to American and British forces to avoid capture by the Russians. Group Captain Johnny Johnson is playing soccer when a German bomber crew lands at his airfield to give themselves up.
And I think they were quite astounded when they saw the group captain dressed up in a pair of football shorts and looking rather scruffy. And anyway, the chap eventually saluted me and said he bombed up and would like a Spitfire escort. And then we could all go off together and attack the Russians to the east of Berlin. So we helped him on his way to the prison of war camp.
Erich Hartmann, with 352 kills and known as the Black Devil of the Eastern Front, has special reason to fear the advancing Russians. He surrenders to an American officer.
The American gave his word of honor that no German would be handed over to the Russians. But in a few days, we were told that we were going to drive to Munich. We went south, and then suddenly we turned east and drove into a forest and arrived at a Russian outpost. So the whole column was stopped and handed over to the Russians. And this is how I wound up in Russian captivity.
Hartmann is fated to spend 10 years in a Soviet prison. He is one of the lucky ones. He will return home alive. April 30th, 1945. Russian troops battle to the doorstep of the Reichstag. May 2nd, 1945. Berlin surrenders. Arseny Vorozhikin enters the city on foot.
We had to pick and make our way through the corpses of those German soldiers. I wouldn't even call them soldiers. They were mostly kids, children dressed in SS uniforms, and old men. And so as we were coming up to the Imperial Chancellery, we saw the eagle lying there. It was a 2-meter-long bronze eagle. For more than 12 years, it had soared over the Imperial Chancellery, and the whole world shuddered as a result of that eagle. Our soldiers came and threw it down. And there it was now, under our feet, that eagle, a smashed lump on the ground.
May 7th, 1945. Germany signs an unconditional surrender. Sergei Dolgushin, Red Air Force.
My chief of staff came up and said, "Commander, we've had a coded telegram from headquarters. They say, until special orders, stop all flights." So I looked at them and said, "Okay, kids, it's the end of the war." As to what I felt, I can tell you, I simply couldn't move. I couldn't move my arms or my legs. I was a 24-year-old kid. I was used to combat. I wasn't particularly weak. Here, I just couldn't do anything. I just simply lay down flat under the wing, and the mechanic put a parachute under my head. As I lay there, I saw a vision of the horrible battles from the 22nd of June when the war began. I remembered all those kids whom I'd never see again, with whom I'd never be able to have a toast together for victory. It all raced through my mind. Of course, there was a general feeling of exultation, of triumph, victory for which we had been waiting for nearly 4 years and for which we paid much too heavy a price.
World War II is the costliest conflict in human history. In Germany, 4.5 million dead. 500,000 Britons dead. 300,000 Americans dead. 20 million Russians dead. More than 13 million civilians dead. So many unknown dead. So many heroes, known and unknown.
We were told if Japan was occupied, the Japanese people would be exterminated from the face of the earth.
As Allied forces close in on their homeland, Japanese pilots will turn to a last desperate weapon, the suicide attack.
And a kamikaze came through and hit the center LFT and sunk it. That was our first experience with the kamikaze, and it was rather frightening.
October 1944. An awesome fleet of 200 American ships, including 17 aircraft carriers loaded with more than 1,000 planes, spans the horizon off Leyte Island in the Philippines. The Japanese move to meet them, aware that the battle will determine the fate of Japan. Beating back the U.S. forces will buy an honorable peace.
I think the Japanese wanted Leyte to be the last battle, followed by a peace treaty. But before negotiating a treaty, the Japanese wanted to chase the Americans away from Leyte, so our bargaining position would improve. To achieve such a big victory, a small number of pilots was not enough, so Japan sent 3 squadrons.
An invasion force hits the island. Ships and planes from U.S. Navy Task Force 38 support the landings. Japanese warships must be kept away from the beachheads. Japanese planes must be stopped from blasting the American troops. The stage is set for an epic battle. American scouts prowl the Pacific, searching for the Japanese task force.
And all of a sudden, emergency flight quarters was sounded on the communication system, and I knew what had happened. We'd located the Japanese forces. So we manned the ready room and manned our airplanes, and we knew this was going to be a long one.
The U.S. Navy's top ace, David McCampbell, plunges into the go-for-broke Battle of Leyte Gulf.
And I looked around and I saw just my wingman and I up there. So then I called the ship and told them that we had about 40 fighters up here. Could they send some help? The word came back from the fighter director, says, we don't have anybody else to send you. So Roy and I went to work on them.
The combat is furious, dreamlike. During the frenzy, McCampbell scores 9 kills. When he returns to his carrier, his gas tanks are sucking air. Only 6 rounds are left in his guns. McCampbell earns the Medal of Honor. The Japanese managed to maneuver a deadly fleet within range of Leyte. In the late afternoon, Butch Boris gets the order to attack, but the numbers don't add up. The enemy carriers are too far away to allow a margin of safe return.
Right there, you knew that probably half the planes could not return to their carrier, but we went ahead. And the sun had gone down, and we came upon them and we made our attacks. It was pretty heavy, and we lost a lot of them.
The attack is successful, but as the sun disappears, U.S. pilots fly into a nightmare.
We know we haven't got enough fuel to get home. The torpedo planes are calling out, I'm out of fuel, I'm going in the water. And it was just a continuous thing like that all the way back.
What's left of the air group limps home in darkness. U.S. carriers risk stalking Japanese submarines and try to help the fighters home by showing their lights. Boris follows the shreds of light and finds the deck.
I got down. My wingman crashed into the barriers right behind me. From then on out, we were pushing airplanes over the side. They were landing in the water, parachuting out. And this went on until there were no more airplanes. They were all gone, or the few of us got down. We lost over half of our aircraft that night.
The beachhead on Leyte is secured, but the battle for the air is wicked.
The Americans were full of energy. I was told that 100 warplanes were flying toward the south. At first I thought this must be a mistake, crows or something. But it was no mistake. And I began worrying because I had only 10 men. The B-24s bombed our airbase. I couldn't break into their formation. I chased the bombers for about 300 kilometers and attacked 7 of them. 2 were shot down.
Walker Bud Mahurin is transferred to the Pacific after being shot down in Europe. He will survive yet another brush with death.
Coming home from a mission, my airplane started to lose coolant, and when it started to clank, which is kind of an indication that it's going to catch on fire, I bailed out. And I spent about 6 hours in the ocean in a one-man raft, scared to death, of course. The air-sea rescue folks ended up by sending an air-sea rescue boat out to pick me up. I came up on the deck of that rescue boat, and the crew handed me a cup of chocolate, hot chocolate, and I drank that hot chocolate down, went back to the stern, and threw up everything I'd eaten for 40 days. Quite exciting.
U.S. forces fulfilled General MacArthur's pledge to return to the Philippines. American power will strike next at a place few fighting men had ever heard of before, and none will ever forget: Iwo Jima. February 1945. Air and sea bombardment hammer Iwo Jima, only 750 miles from the heart of Tokyo. Iwo's strategic importance is its airstrip, used by the Japanese fighters to intercept American bombers on their way to Japan. Satoshi Anabuki takes on American bombers, unloading fire and destruction on the once untouchable Japanese mainland. It is a difficult challenge.
The bombers could reach very high altitudes, and we had a hard time climbing up to intercept them. If we could wait at their anticipated altitude, then it was all right. I downed one bomber. I saw it catching fire, emitting black smoke and flying away. I couldn't see it crash. American bombers were headed back south after bombing the Hanshin area. I took off with the rest of my unit. They were at about 12,000 feet and made the mistake of not flying in tight formation. We shot down about 13 planes. I achieved glories because the enemy was careless.
To protect the heavy bombers, the Americans need Iwo's airstrip as a base for P-51 escort fighters. American Marines launch an amphibious assault against Iwo Jima. Japanese resistance is fierce. Outnumbered in the air, only a handful of Japanese pilots defend the island. Iyozo Fujita, Japanese Air Force.
We had radar on Iwo in the beginning. We were warned the enemy is coming. We took off, but they were not coming at all. They tricked us. We were confused, so we landed. Then a lookout saw them coming, and we took off again. We flew low, line astern, but were cut off. In just 2 days, we were completely destroyed.
The battle for Iwo Jima is the bloodiest in the history of the U.S. Marines. 6,000 will die on that desolate island. 17,000 are wounded. The Japanese lose more than 20,000 men. Only 1,000 are taken prisoner. Marine flamethrowers root out die-hard Japanese, burrowed deep inside caves. Marines seize Iwo's airfield. Now, crippled bombers returning to Tokyo can land on Iwo. But more important, long-range P-51 Mustangs can escort American bombers all the way to Japan.
In the beginning, when the bombers came, our fighters could shoot some of them down. But later, when P-51s began escorting the bombers, we could do nothing. It became very difficult to defend the mainland. I knew that the rest of the war would be a great challenge.
There is one more stepping stone to Japan, the fortress island of Okinawa. Allied warships mass offshore. The U.S. Navy had 3 carriers when the Pacific War began. Now there are 40. Easter Sunday, 1945. Marines and Army infantry land on Okinawa, seize the airstrip. The Japanese counterattack. In the air, they throw all their available fighters against the invasion fleet. Japanese pilots face swarms of U.S. fighters and bombers as thick as rain. They are desperate for a new strategy. Over Leyte Gulf, the Japanese tested a terrible weapon. Suicide pilots ordered to crash their planes into American targets. Off Okinawa, these human bombs, the kamikazes, drop from the sky like fireballs.
Kamikaze is a surprise attack, according to our ancient war tactics. A surprise attack means to do something unexpected. Surprise attacks will be successful the first time, maybe for 2 or 3 times. However, eventually the Americans would find a way to protect themselves from our attacks. When I saw a suicide attack for the first time, I was very shocked. A fighter who was caught in the anti-aircraft fire made a body attack on the enemy's carrier. I felt how brave he is. Congratulations. But at the same time, I felt, was there any way to help him? So many different feelings came to mind.
The kamikazes take a heavy toll of the U.S. fleet. Some get through the curtain of fire. 38 U.S. naval vessels will be lost. American pilots must find a way to defend against an adversary for whom death in battle is the supreme honor. Kamikaze, divine wind. Pilots plunge to destruction inside Zeros weighted with 500-pound bombs. They create carnage in the fleet off Okinawa's shores, dodging Hellcats and Corsairs on the way down.
The Americans attacked Okinawa. Against such an enemy, against the unexpected moves of the enemy, no strategy would have been effective. No strategy was planned. The planes that flew near Okinawa received orders to attack, attack, attack. Well, there was no other way then to make kamikaze attacks. We did not have time to plan a strategy.
American gunners throw up a wall of fire against the suicide attacks. It is so intense, even their own pilots are shot down.
I bailed out off the island of Okinawa during that campaign. The United States Navy USS Beale shot me down while they were trying to fire at another at a Japanese airplane. I hit the wrong airplane.
Once the gunners take over, they shoot at everything. The old saying, shoot them all down and start them out on the ground. And it's awful hard to get them to stop once they start firing.
The orders to fly and die come from above. Some Japanese pilots question the fanatical doctrine of death.
I went on the very first kamikaze mission. Kamikaze attacks were very, very foolish attacks. All the men who were in the headquarters lied. Every pilot volunteered for a kamikaze unit. I go, I go, I go. Did everyone say that? That's a lie. You are ordered. So-and-so numbers from that squadron. So-and-so numbers from this squadron. Only a fool would want to go for a sacrifice attack. The commanding officers told us, if you want to volunteer for the kamikaze unit, hand in a slip of paper with your name on it. If you don't want to volunteer, hand in a slip of paper with your name on it. In the climate of the Japanese military forces during the war, it was very difficult to say you didn't want to die. Americans who heard kamikaze stories think that the Japanese must be strange. They think we are crazy. We are not crazy. Both American pilots and Japanese pilots are the same human beings. We are there people who will volunteer to die. No one wants to die. But if a pilot was ordered, we were all military men. We would go. I think the Americans might have thought the kamikaze attack was a very poor strategy. And if the commanding office had had a better strategy, they would have used it. But in fact, there was no alternative. It was a dying struggle. Compared to the number of planes that made kamikaze attacks, the results were not very satisfactory. The losses were greater than the glories. I tried to lift up the young pilots' morale. I made songs, awarded them kill markers, but it was difficult to lift up the morale. If new planes had been built and the pilots trained to fly them, then they would have achieved victories and their confidence would have grown. But by the end of the war, I too felt so depressed.
The battle for Okinawa ends on June 22, 1945. Casualties on both sides exceed 100,000. The island is a wasteland. Swarming kamikazes destroy 38 American warships, killing 5,000 sailors and airmen. Allied planners asked themselves, if it is like this on Okinawa, what will it be like when we invade Japan?
After Okinawa's fall, only the Japanese mainland was left. No enemy ships were to be allowed to reach the mainland. That was an order. All the pilots were ordered to make sacrifice attacks. That was a strategy for winning battles on the mainland. Fight to the death, die on the coast. If a decisive battle actually happened, Japan would be a disaster. Tokyo was all burned down from B-29 raids. If the emperor saw what happened to Tokyo, why didn't he demand to stop the war? When I faced the Americans' continuous raid on the mainland, I felt that Japan would not be able to win the war because we were pushed to the edge. Of course, I did not express my opinion. Even though I felt that there was no way to stop the enemy, we non-commissioned officers could not do anything. The only thing we could do was to continue fighting.
It is clear Japan will not surrender. Invasion will mean an ocean of blood.
Some might have felt that we would lose the war, but I didn't think we would lose until the last minute. I figured that when we were suffering, the enemy must be suffering too. That's the way I saw it. So when I heard the emperor's announcement ending the war, I was very frustrated.
World War II ends as it began, in flames. The vanquished mourn. The victors celebrate. A weight is lifted from the planet. For a moment, there is no peril in the sky. That moment will be all too brief. Still, it is a moment to cherish.